Before I introduce Dr. Horton, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge John Viehe, the alumnus whose philanthropy has made today's lecture and reading possible. John, would you please stand up to be recognized? Through John's generous support of this lectureship and this lecture series, John enables us the opportunity to bring accomplished big thinkers, intellectuals, and creative artists to campus to further educate and challenge our collective perspective across many disciplines. The lectureship and the series are named in the honor of John's father, Theodore Albert Viehe. And John has ensured that future generations of our RIT family will have access to these lectures as he has added the lectureship to his estate plans. Thank you again, John, for thinking not only of the students here in the room today, but for all the students who will follow and benefit from your gift. The generous Viehe gift is also helping make tomorrow's signature performance featuring Randall Horton and the group Radical Reversal possible. This poetry and performance event will be hosted at the Theater at Innovation Square in downtown Rochester, starting at 7 p.m. Free and open to the public. We welcome you all to join us also for tomorrow night's performance and to bring your friends and anyone else that you want to bring along. Tonight's lecture is being recorded. We will make it available on YouTube after the event, and we'll encourage everyone to revisit the reading and lecture when posted online, and also to share it further at that time. Randall Horton is the author of the memoir Dead Weight, published by Northwestern University Press in 2022. And now I'll move on to a long list of accolades. Randall is the recipient of the Gwendolyn Brooks Poetry Award, the Gonzalez Poetry Award, the Great Lakes Association New Writers Award for Creative Nonfiction, and a National Endowment of the Arts Fellowship awardee for literature. In 2018 to 19, Dr. Horton was selected as Poet in Residence for the Civil Rights Corps in Washington, D.C. This is a nonprofit organization dedicated to challenging systemic injustice in the American legal system. Randall is also a member of the experimental performance group Radical Reversal, who will be performing tomorrow night, and Heroes Are Gang Leaders, which received the 2018 American Book Award in Oral Literature, and the Heroes Are Gang Leaders project, the Baraka Sessions, was named Best Vocal Jazz Album by NPR in 2019. And in 2020, Dr. Horton received a Right to Return Fellowship to creatively address issues of mass incarceration and racial injustice while advancing campaigns for change. Dr. Horton is a professor of English at the University of New Haven. Dr. Horton, this is a wonderful list of accolades. Mr. Horton's reading will be followed by a Q&A moderated by Professor Erica Haskell, Director of RIT School of Performing Arts. Please plan to join us also for the open conversation following Dr. Randall Horton's reading. This event and tomorrow night's performance are co-sponsored by the College of Arts and Design, the College of Liberal Arts, the School of Individualized Study, the School of Performing Arts, the Division of the RIT Division of Student Affairs, the Division of Diversity and Inclusion, the Monroe Community College, the Center for Engaged Storycraft, and likely also additional units and people and friends whom I have neglected to mention. Even if I did not mention, you know that your support is encouraged or is appreciated, warmly so. Many people have been involved in conceptualizing and planning this event. Please allow me to recognize fellow deans, Todd Jokel of Art and Design, seated right over here, Jim Hall, Dean of the School of Individualized Studies over there, Erica Haskell, School Director Performing Arts, Ben Wilmot, Operations Director Performing Arts, and Carrie Johnson of the College of Liberal Arts, and Beth Schoenfeld of the College of Art and Design. So before we begin, please join me also in thanking our sign language interpreters for making this event accessible to all. Enjoy the reading and also plan to spend some time with us tomorrow night at the Theodore at Innovation Square at 7 p.m. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you for that introduction. How's everybody doing? Y'all good? All right. I want to thank Dr. Todd Joko, Dr. Erica Haskell, and my man Jim, who I've known forever. We've been trying to do this for a long time, and it's good to be here. Thank you for inviting me, and I just hope I'm worthy sitting up here saying a few words. So we're gonna start we're gonna get right at it, and we'll talk about it as we go. Because Hook Doesn't Exist, 2009, Harlem, New York. Answer the phone at 10 p.m. Offer a reserved hello on the nebulous night filled with powderless snow in Harlem. Respond with okay. Listen. Be attentive when you learn he died in the hail of gunfire at the intersection of Minnesota Avenue and East Capitol Streets in the nation's capital. After thinking that's fucked up, thank your old college roommate for calling. Ignore that he greeted you as Hook, the nickname you went by in the streets. Hang up. You can and can't believe the truth simultaneously. Write DISCO in your leather journal. Maybe this will immortalize the image. You will never forget him, but you have already forgotten Hook. Before the blackbird's echo bangs against your windowsill, wake up. Go directly to the mahogany desk between two windows, sit in the brown swivel chair, stare at the building opposite your building, rearrange papers that don't need rearranging twice. Open your journal to the name written last night, Disco. Remember, the cell doors opening after serving 18 months for 3 felonies in Fairfax County, adult detention center. 5 hours after that release, meet Disco willing an ATM through your basement on a handcart. Out of the wall with the metal chain and pickup truck, he had pulled the money machine. He did that. This is your introduction. Turn on the computer. Type Theodore Blanford in the search box. Click the magnifying glass. Expect to be surprised even though you know what the results will bring. Don't be surprised when you scroll to Maryland, double homicide, suspect shot, killed in D.C. One lone bird outside your window flies backwards at an indeterminate rate of speed while the world moves forward. The bird is red. Look for balance in the oddity. Note, double homicide is 5 syllables. 5 deliberate pauses before damn. Remember, you knew the suspect shoot a killer. Suspend court in your imagination. Add 4 indeterminate words to formulate the phrase, hold court in the streets. This is how he would die, holding court in the streets. Prophetic. After reading that the now deceased wife had wanted a divorce deduced it was because of drugs. Visualize the wife and sister just before death in their double wide. Try to make sense of blood spilled on the carpet, the red is deafening scream. Wait for the buzz to stop because someone rang the wrong buzzer. There is always an echo after the buzzing. Even after it buzzes again, don't answer it. It is not for you. Keep reading the online article, but more specifically the phrases forcible entry, protective order. Acknowledge that your friend was a suspect in his first wife's murder too. A dead body in the trunk. 2 days later, while driving to school, the teacher called Short Man because it takes that long to find someone to talk about tragedy. Tell Short Man, who is a barber and has 10 years behind razor wire tucked in his memory, what happened. Agree in unison that prison would turn the brain into a hum. Agree again that prison taught you to be a better criminal, though you both digress. Both of you understand the term anomaly, but admit that Disco was a composite of many men who never learned to be a man. You would then ask the question for the first time, why? Return back home from New Haven before rush hour traffic begins to bottleneck the Cross County Parkway. Dig through the closet for the first version of your hope to be, sorry about that. Return back home from New Haven before rush hour traffic begins to bottleneck the Cross County Parkway. Dig through the closet for the first version of your memoir. Disco roll the safe out of the department store. The first lines of the paragraph read. Go to the next page where he loves to pull the trigger of a gun more than he loves touching the torso of a woman. Flip to the page where he and his sister distributed lead bullets through the windshield and the impressions of circular holes when the discarded lead pierces the glass are swift, pronounced. The body is a question mark. He tried to run over the wife with his truck and then threatened her with a claw hammer. She told the police. Ask yourself why this sign didn't signify violence. What theory would Ferdinand de Saussure classify this under? Put the manuscript back in the closet. Don't beat yourself up because you knew he was a killer and said nothing to nobody. Forget the double negative your mom would correct you on and tell yourself it's nature versus nurture. Justify your silence in saying that the world you once lived in was filled with silence and mayhem. That is why they called you Hook. Don't block Audre Lorde's "Your silence will not protect you" from your mind. Pretend this is penance. Wake up the next morning. Go back to the computer. Press any key to erase the black screen. Ignore the blackbirds outside your window while telling yourself this is the last time. You need to forget. But before you do, one more search. Click inmate violent deaths in the news. A flutter of blackbirds appears suspended in animation at the top right corner of the web page. Ignore them, but then don't. Tell yourself this is not Karma, Edgar Allan Poe style. He did not want her to leave. She wanted him to go. Said he needed treatment. Think back to 12-step literature that cautions about the 13th step, sexual fraternization with people inside the circle. Feel confident in assuming that she was a recovering addict and understood addictive behavior. Two addicts don't make a right. Tell yourself this. Read about the interaction with police who failed to notice the inevitable. Admit the judicial system is failing to protect women. I am victim was tattooed on her forehead, yet she remained invisible to the patriarchs, the ones sworn to protect and serve. Ask yourself, does his death matter more than the victim's death? Convince yourself the race never stops running, that memory will eat your ass alive. Say, I am a changed man, but no one will hear you. Get back into bed. Pull the covers over your face. Remember the dream. Forget Hook. Wake up tomorrow and feel guilty again. So I read, that was from my first memoir. So it's called Hook. And the first piece was called Because the Hook Doesn't Exist Anymore. And it's basically saying why that part of my life doesn't exist anymore. You know what I mean? Yeah, so Dead Weight. This is an interesting book in that it's a little kaleidoscopic. I'm going to read excerpts. And so the first one, I guess is a meditation. So it begins with a meditation with the Invisible Man. And I don't know how many of you read Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man. Oh, yeah, my guy over there. That's right. So the protagonist in Invisible Man is a statue in New York City, like I think it's on 140-something in Riverside, right? It's a statue, Elizabeth Claret. It's this big statue, and I just stay right there. And I would go there all the time and write. And this piece came out of, this whole piece came out of that experience. I guess this is all right. Yeah. Hold on a second. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, that whole piece came out of this experience, right? But what it does is sort of flashes back to various points in my childhood and growing up from Birmingham in Alabama, and talks about race from various lenses, right? So put your chin strap on. I'm kidding, man. No, I'm not. So we'll see how it works out. I'm gonna try to switch. So basically, I think I'm gonna switch to from talk. So I call him Cutout Man because it's this big old statue, and it's real, like it's clear, and and you can see the insides of it and all kind of things. So it's my nickname for him is Cutout Man. But I'm gonna switch to a moment of integration back in the 60s at some point. You'll see it. You'll feel the transition, right? But here we go. The ephemeral foliage to my left, blocking the picturesque view from Riverside, is outlined by hemp dogbane, hay-scented ferns, and golden alexanders. Before the riverbank's edge, Virginia bluebells faintly obscure the yellow water taxi sputtering southbound toward that section of lower Manhattan resembling an upside-down middle finger bird in the Hudson on a New York City map. 100 yards out over the river, seagulls pipe unpredictable trajectories and broken syntax, often suspending themselves mid-sentence, wading in the depths caesura, then free-falling backwards into patterns of descriptive sign language. Two BMX riders with black bikes parallel in identical pedal rotation rapidly approach before scuttling southbound on the walkway in a muted blur, unaware of their subtext of uniformity. At 139th Street, vintage flood lamps, though not lit, are pronounced erect in line single file along the walkway. A mother haphazardly waves a wand of streaming bubbles while her trailing son and daughter play a game of catch and burst the bubble. Long before the game of life bursts the innocuous state and reality smashes into them head on with the force of a Mack truck. There is serene music in the background. A loud congregation of finches invisible within the trees, their culminating voices singing in imperfect choral structures. Diesel engine buses join the melodious overtone with the stop and go of their compression brakes up and down Riverside. Because it is mandated by the New York City Parks Department to clean up after your dog, there are sporadic flashes of pooper scoopers bending down with plastic bags to retrieve animal waste deposited on the walkway. A few more steps up the steep incline is 150th Street and the official entrance to Riverbank State Park. Its tall perforated metal sign bearing the park's name in bright red letters, accented by the wrought iron gate painted green, complete with guard shack nearby. Then the view to the left bends back to the brackish blue water of the Hudson before opening onto a canopy of trees, as if the impending stretch of walkway is the calm before the storm. Dust seems more eager to descend on this East Coast island, and headlights will soon stab the darkness while inching across the bridge into New Jersey. The smell of yesterday's rain is a crisp inhale with each elongated stride along the walkway. At 150th Street, a small, oval-shaped park has at its center a 15-foot high, 10-foot wide, 6-inch thick bronze sculpture by Elizabeth Catlett, resting on raised bed of grass. Carved out of the slab is the silhouette of a man who has no rib cage or flesh or veins. His insides are cut out. The silhouette holds his right hand up as if to say stop, while the left is anchored to the side as if providing balance against the turbulence this world is capable of inflicting, a sort of rudder. Next to the monument is a concrete marker inscribed with these words: I am an invisible man. I am invisible to understand simply because people refuse to see me. Behold, Ralph Ellison's Invisible Man. The silhouette, whom I will call Cutout Man, could represent me in various stages of a complicated life, at times unable to escape the social pitfalls that have befallen a slew of black men, particularly in the 80s, an era that seems so damn archaic now. The residual damage caused by drugs and long prison sentence, however, is ever present. I take a seat on one of the curved benches nearby and study my doppelganger in amazement as spectator and spectacle, fanatical-like, thinking how easily the sculptor of this timeless character in somebody else's melodrama sequestered an unimaginable protagonist rendered real. The unauthorized biographers of our, yes, mine and his life trajectory charted a path wrought with racism, deception, trickery, willful ambiguity, satire, and comedic relief alongside the theater of the absurd. We were only made aware of our lot in society through an accidental point of view. That moment, we were able to reverse the lens and peer into twisted eyes connected to a brain that dreamed a horrific fantasy for which there seems no immediate escape. Cutout Man and I fell victim to a narrative that featured us as the tragedy, the sad sack, the bumbling idiot unable to control the thematic threads within our own storyline. We could not hear the hidden or silent dialogue that kept our daily existence simmering below the surface of the living. The only difference between us is that I was born not of the pen, but of the flesh. Blood courses through my veins, and I am filled with bone and sinew, yet my insides, too, are invisible as a cutout. I get up from the bench and position myself so that I am looking into Cutout Man's eyes before he can split the scene. On this day, we are alone in New York City, Hamilton Heights to be exact, a rarity in a city of millions. I have long held a burning desire to dialogue with this symbol of erasure about the madness that made both of us real. This is my opportunity. Although I'm talking to myself, I am talking to Cutout Man. Today, he will be my therapist. I can see straight through his body, clear across the Hudson River to the Jersey shoreline. He is a pattern or figure traced, then cut from a human being, an outline within an outline, right? And so what we do is we switch over to here, right? Yep. And so now, the second conversation, this is the sort of the second conversation, and I'm talking to this statue, right? And so we have this conversation. And so I'm talking about race, right? And we'll start right here. Cutout Man. I did not mean to insult your intelligence. This was the emphatic statement. Find me somewhere, because I ain't going to school with white people no more. The directive, or more specifically, this direct order coming out of the mouth of my 10-year-old self didn't pull punches about inner feelings, nor did it delve into great detail with vivid imagery, nor did it provide reasoning behind the sudden departure request other than what they, the parents, already knew. The statement was blurted without the litany of complaints because that would ring rhetorical, like a dog chasing his tail. You see, it would have been useless to list the numerous times I heard, "Hey, nigga," in the 5th grade while walking down the hill from the middle school to the K through 3rd section where my mother taught so that we could go home at the end of the day. Or the various occasions I dodged and zigzag rocks thrown in my head, or the unrestricted side eyes and mean-spirited stares from the kids who did not look like me. Believe me, the weight of carrying race when no one else around you carries race is daunting, draining. It creates an inner anger that, once unleashed, is an unmitigated force. Now, although Brown and Board of Education was decided in 1954, some schools and districts waited until the early 70s to desegregate. In Birmingham, Alabama, or the Magic City, That glowing republic of Southern oligarchy, compliance came in the waning hours in the fall of '72. This desegregation included integrating teachers, which brought me, the 10-year-old, to the emphatic statement about white people. My mother and I entered Gardendale Elementary as a social experiment of integration mandated by the Supreme Court. And I would soon come to find out what it meant to be black. There is a wonderful video of James Baldwin debating William Buckley at Cambridge University on the argument that the American dream has been achieved at the expense of the American Negro. The event was hosted by the Cambridge Union, a student debating society, in 1965, 4 years after my birth at the segregated South Highlands Infirmary on the South Side. There's a moment, about 18 minutes into the video, where Baldwin articulates. In the case of an American Negro, born in that glittering republic, and in the moment you were born, since you don't know any better, every stick and stone, every face is white. And since you have not seen yet a mirror, you suppose that you are too. It comes as a great shock around the age of 5 or 6 or 7 to discover that the flag to which you have pledged allegiance, along with everybody else, is not a pledge allegiance to you. It comes as a great shock to discover that as Gary Cooper is killing off the Indians, and you are rooting for Gary Cooper, that the Indians were you. The thing is, cutout man, before my entry into Gardendale, every time I pledged allegiance in the classroom, it had been with kids who looked like me. Kids I learned to high-five, dap up, and shoot marbles between shotgun houses with as we meandered into our teenage years. Did you know that Toni Morrison took the position that something was lost in segregation? The loss doesn't celebrate the division racism produces, but what came out of that division, a way of going against the grain for the sake of self-survival, taking the blackness forced upon you, the nigger that you became, and making it valuable, something to be studied, imitated, appropriated, and commodified within contemporary culture for the sake of modern art. Me and the kids I once pledged allegiance were being conditioned to blindly pledge loyalty to a system we hadn't begun to understand, nor had that system pledged allegiance to us. There had been dynamite blasts, water hoses thrust upon the throngs, billy club beatings, dog bites, hangings, insurrections against humanity, and violence right in our own city, and yet we remained oblivious to the outer world of segregation, encapsulated in our own society of a perceived otherness. Maybe if we kids had been aware, or if our parents had been more woke, we all would have revolted against this narrative, or at least questioned this insane allegiance to a society not yet fully committed to our best interests. And yes, I would watch the old westerns with my father, cheering for the cowboys to do the Indians dirty. Even outside playing with my friends between the shotgun houses in Smithfield, I strutted a 6-shooter cap gun with a full cowboy suit, thinking I could be the Lone Ranger, when in actuality, all I could ever hope to be was Tonto, a sidekick. What Baldwin knew, and I didn't, but would soon come to find out, was that there is a terrifying moment in one system of reality, a moment that will contextualize race from which there's no return. True, you do become the thing to be hunted and treated like an animal. The trauma is difficult to remember and retell. I begin slow, meek, then it happened. Say what? I can't hear you. Speak a little louder. Cutout man is pushing the story out of my mouth. Don't hold back now. Get it out. Speak. I come back again with, then it happened. That's it. Now we talking. I continue with authority. The ball was up in the air, and Michael Hallmark, my new best white friend, had thrown the spiral perfectly. I was so fast, I thought I would jump out of my PF flies, and they were laced real tight. I wanted to jump high, but couldn't jump high enough because the ball was sailing too far for my fingertips to reach. The ball hit a girl on her side. I went to pick the ball up. She kicked real hard, called me nigger. She called me nigger, called me a nigger. And I punched her in the mouth with my fist. Hard. Red appeared on her face. Red blood rolling down her white face. She started crying. I started laughing. I wanted to cry. She called me nigger. And I hit her real hard. And it felt good. Let me be clear. My mother, Eunice Pearl Davis, now Horton, but daughter of Rosalie, was never a time out or stand in the corner type of mother. My mother never hesitated to give teachers full authorizations to paddle without parental consent when deemed necessary. I have no memory of how I arrived at the principal's office to wait for punishment. Maybe it was the eerie silence surrounding the event because the teachers knew something I did not in terms of history related to black boys and white women in the South. The memory of what transpired after my arrival is clear. Eunice Pearl comes into the office and says to the principal standing over me, "Do not lay one hand on him." Now, when I say never, I mean never, ever did Eunice Pearl, my mother, utter those words in regard to punishment. I knew then, in this racialized moment, my response to an action was bigger than the act. But Baldwin knew there would become a time, and that time had arrived. It would take a few orbits around the sun for me to understand the enormous weight, the intensity of the primal scene that could have taken my life. Forget 2 years after 11-day segregation from my mother, but then don't. That's another part I didn't even tell you about, like when I was born in Birmingham, I was born in segregation, so I was a preemie. I was born at 7 months, and they didn't have an incubator, and so they put me upstairs in the white ward with the white babies. My mother never saw me for 11 days. So she had a baby, but she didn't. I had to wait till I was 5 pounds for her to come see me and take me home. Insane. That's what I'm talking about. Forget 2 years after the 11-day segregation from my mother, but then don't. How on September 15th, 1963, a Sunday morning dynamite blast inside a church morphed 4 little girls into a forever memory. Forget Carol Denise McNair, but don't. Forget Allie Mae Collins, but don't. Forget Cynthia Wesley, but don't. Forget Carol Robertson, but don't. And don't forget black boys. There's always a lineage of black boys to draw context from, too. There had been Virgil Ware sitting on the handlebars of his brother's bicycle who caught a bullet in the chest from a shooter riding shotgun on the back of a Confederate flag bearing motorbike. The end result, face down in the ditch. James Robinson, angered by the church bombing because he had already experienced the moment of race realization, gunned down 2 hours after the blast in an alley. And make no mistake, the police account matters more than the victim. The usual responses came after the fact. He lunged, reached, looked suspicious, made a move. They always flee. The police fired in the air, fired in self-defense, because niggas be magical. Niggas hang themselves by themselves, turn water into wine, slip out of handcuffs, be looking like every other nigga, do other niggas' time in jail, real and imagine, make freedom disappear in a finger snap, or turn it into a life sentence. Or worse yet, niggas get shot dead, and the world changed to television. Unbothered, unfettered, unmoved. My father, who left work with the ghost of Emmett Till on his mind when he got the call from Gardendale Elementary that I hit a white girl, would years later admit he had to go. Had to. He had to because I was in a place that didn't want me, that said, hey, nigga, every day to discourage me from falling in love with their idea of beauty, their idea of truth, to never mistake blackness for whiteness in terms of privilege. The principal wanted integration, was part of a movement in Birmingham for equal education and access, perhaps was a dreamer in believing that all the men and women were created equal. In his dream, he saw the need to protect this black boy from a fate all too clear from black boys who did not stay in line. The principal called a meeting with my father and the girl's parents. The parents wanted blood and neck, and were not at all happy their little girl with blood coagulated on her face and lips got clocked in the mouth by a nigger. But neither was the black boy happy at being called a nigger. So we sat in the conundrum. In the end, the principal sided with his gut. The question being, what had I done wrong? My parents taught me not to hate. I did not call the girl trailer trash or any of the derogatory terms I would come to know as an adult. Perhaps the principal had no choice if this social experiment was going to have the opportunity to work. But what about the below the surface narrative by those who often control the narrative, whispering in the parent's ear, you know, he can go missing. Done happened before. Turn up in the Coosa River with his face eaten by catfish. I will never know how close I came to being sung up with my neck snapped in Kelly Ingram Park, hanging from a makeshift wooden cross. I would go back to school the next day like nothing happened. That big-ass elephant no one wanted to acknowledge in the room, still present and accounted for. The kids knew what happened. I knew what happened, yet not one of the adults wanted to talk about it openly. No one cared to ask me about the trauma of the moment, the fact that I hit a girl when all my life I had been told that was the one thing in life never to do. After that incident, I didn't associate with the other kids in my class. I only wanted to get as far from that racial madness as humanly possible, because it became evident these people were incapable of being human. I never saw the girl again. Maybe her parents took her out of school unhappy at how white folks cared about the fate of black boys in Jefferson County, Alabama. One thing I'm almost certain of, and would love to confirm years later, the little white girl never called anyone a nigger again. The next year, 6th grade, I was strolled into an all-black Catholic school planted directly in the hood, across the tracks in Titusville. Thank God. Anyway, so I know that's a little rough, right? That's okay. We good? We still here? Y'all with me? All right, okay. I know it gets a little rough. If you don't feel it right here, then I'm not doing my job as a writer. I mean, that's just what it is, and I'm not going to sugarcoat nothing. I'm going to tell you like how I feel about it. So I'm going to end with a piece that's probably a little bit more and close to not the work I do, but for those of you who don't know, I was formerly incarcerated, system impacted. I spent 5 years in prison. Had this other life. And when I got out of prison, I went and got my BA, MFA, PhD. I became a writer. And I've been full professor now for like 13, going on 14 years. Well, not full professor, but I've been teaching that long. Full professor about 6 now, 5, something like that. But anyway, the thing is that like I you know, there's a life, and you know, I definitely try to get at some of the things that that I know to be true within the criminal justice system. So yeah, let me read one more little piece and then we'll talk about some things. I'm gonna read a hard one. I read hard stuff, man. So my stuff is it's kind of a look in your face, man. So 3 strikes and a backstab. Nope. The next one. Oh, incompetent. Here we go. And so in this one, I sort of basically go through a memory. But what I'm trying to do actually is get at the 80s and talk about these different ways in which, people were getting caught up in the drug trade through my own experiences, right? So, yeah. And so, it's complicated. Question: is there a clemency for the mute body screaming guilt? I only asked because the first slap recoiled like a car backfiring. The second became a Sunday morning sinner's wail after a long night of bourbon, followed by another backfiring slap echoing against the alley and gutted brownstones. Then please don't. Why is not the question, I shouted, but the woman being hit 3 stories below dead. Hit or slap might resonate too delicate with the ear, more like beat. Yep. He was beating the living fuck out of her, but I didn't do nothing. She stuttered between sobs, and I would go get it, and I heard it all. To peer 3 stories down from the apartment in the abandoned building meant being witness to a man beating a woman, to confront the infinite curse of addiction, homelessness, and admit life had spiraled out of control. The above post on Facebook describes a troubling memory of a fight I witnessed in the mid-'90s while smoking cocaine in an abandoned building on 14th and P in northwest section of Washington, D.C. Without a doubt, the experience is difficult to revisit, let alone write about. And in the post, I leave it unclear as to what I did, if anything, to prevent the assault from occurring. A poet and friend from Montgomery, Alabama, comes across the post and emails me the same day, finding the passage quite disturbing. She simply asks, "What did you do?" To be honest, when I emailed her back, I don't completely answer the question, because to do so will require a lengthy explanation more than I want to provide in an email. To start with, she would need to know about Debbie and the rocky relationship between the two of us, how we got sucked into the metaphorical blizzard of cocaine. Debbie and I tried to save each other from the streets, but as I've said many times before, 2 addicts don't make a right. One night at the room we rented on Florida North Capitol Street, Debbie became enraged during an argument and accused me of cheating on her with another woman. When I reminded Debbie that she sold her body to eat and get high and pay rent, she replied that that was beside the point. We argued a bit more before I left for a few hours to avoid a physical altercation, only to return to "Hell hath no fury like a woman's scorn," scrawled in red lipstick on the mirror above the sink, and all of my clothes shredded with a knife and dials in human urine. This was my introduction to that saying, and I wondered what it meant in relationship to her and me. A year later, I ran into her at 14th and V Streets, an area that always throws me for a loop when I visit busboys and poets to this day, a restaurant, bookstore, and lounge popular in the Washington, D.C. literary scene. I cannot look at busboys and poets for what it is. Instead, I see that strip of land for what it once represented. V Street between 13th and 14th was at times an open-air market filled with women and men who sold their bodies, along with those who sold what was then called crack. To understand how far Debbie and I had ventured down the rabbit hole, to give my poet friend from Alabama context about this post, and to answer her question, I would need to provide some historical perspective. Freebase, Ready Rock, crack. I would explain to my poet friend that freebase is a derivative of powder cocaine, a paste that forms when the powder is cooked. During the early 80s, young hustler chemists learned or were taught that this form of cocaine, once converted into freebase rock, produced quick profits. These hustler chemists then began to sell what would be called ready rock to the streets to users, on the streets to users. This type of cocaine sold well and quickly, So the hustler chemist devised a way to increase profits by producing more rock from the freebase using a substance called comeback. The chemical ratio required a delicate balance of trial and error, greed versus good product. Because my poet friend never knew me as Hook, I would need to reveal how most of the kilos I smuggled into the United States originated from South America, wrapped in fiberglass, the cocaine so potent that once it created a medicinal odor that could saturate an entire room. I would tell my poet friend that the day cocaine transitioned into red rock isn't known, but the day crack became king in my personal realm is clear. I would tell my poet friend that the customers came out of the woodwork, their frames frail, faces gaunt, pupils twinkling as if the secret to everlasting life were being sold on the low, an amulet of eternal possibility, wads of cash produced from liquor store robberies, neighborhood check fraud, 3-card Monte games played on the bus, family theft, food stamp resale, breaking and entering, abuse of the body, and many unthinkable acts, the proceeds needed for the purchase of the beige rock that has suddenly appeared on the streets. My poet friend would need to know that in 1989, once the first stem was lit in the back stairwell of the apartment complex in Southeast DC on Chesapeake Avenue, customers would come running back to the source of this euphoria, not one by one as they had in earlier times, but 2 by 2 and 3 by 3 until the 14-gram beige rock disappeared from my hands. It could have been a magic trick minus the abracadabra, but it wasn't. It could have been in a Donald Goines movie, a novel, but it wasn't. The poet would need to be educated on how comeback created a subculture of demos known as the fake out. Looks like crack, burns like crack, but smell and tastes like plastic. The most desperate of fiends would crush a peppermint until it was all white, lace it with baking soda, place it in a plastic bag or vial, and attempt to pass off the demo as authentic to someone more desperate. But the comeback, vitamin B12, yeast, or other mixing agent that added weight and yielded decent quality was a game changer. You see, the cutting agent maximized profits, perfect in an economy where capitalism was encouraged as an American way of life. It made life easier for the addict, for the rock was pre-cooked and offered easy access. Just take it out of the plastic bag, vial, or aluminum foil and put it right in a straight shooter. So in the mind of the young street hustler, this was an opportunity, the right environment, and a captive audience. Along with comeback came the working 50 and later the working 30 in DC. The names are apropos for the amounts of money they referred to and were designed to fulfill two things, an addict's dream and a hustler's hope. Because my poet friend from Alabama has been to busboys and poets, I would ask her to imagine herself in that area in the early 90s. I would ask her to imagine driving north on 13th Street and taking a left on V. She would have approached the spot where the establishment would appear within 10 years. V was a dimly lit street rife with illicit activity, hustlers, sex workers, and stick-up men. A pimp named D'Angelo ran a brothel behind the elementary school that is now Meridian Public Charter School. And in the nearby alley, a chop shop operated around the clock, taking in stolen vehicles and making them disappear more quickly than a hand clap. D'Angelo left the house, and at about the same time I reemerged from a homeless stint. I became a player on V Street and set up shop in that house with a woman named Pepper, who had helped me survive when I became homeless on T Street years before. Pepper stayed in the back room facing the chop shop, and I fronted her and her boyfriend, Short Man, packages of powder cocaine to sell. They cooked the powder with comeback to stretch the profit. When I ran into Debbie again on the side of V Street that now lines a renovated park with a full-line basketball court and baseball diamond, she was trying to turn a trick to buy a working 50 from Pepper to sell to women chasing a 5-minute high all night across town. Because there was history between Debbie and me, And perhaps because she was jealous that Pepper was someone I trusted, Debbie asked me to watch her back before I went into the house by the alley. It was taking Debbie a long time to find a date, so she ventured closer to where Busboys and Poet is now, trying to catch a John. And we ended up 1 block north on 14th and V. There had been love between Debbie and me, and many days I am at a loss to understand what that love was. I would tell my poet friend about 2 young men, barely 20 years old, who were hanging out by the fire hydrant in the middle of the block, drinking a 40-ounce bottle of beer and counting money from drug sales. Suddenly, and without provocation, one of the men began to chastise Debbie for walking the streets, accusing her of selling demos to their clientele. Maybe his mother and sisters were in the same predicament, walking the streets trying to feed their physical and mental hunger. But clearly, there was disdain for what Debbie represented. Debbie, not one to back down, began a verbal exchange with the guy about not selling demos. Things escalated quickly, and the dude slapped her in the face while his partner remained silent in the background. In retrospect, maybe Debbie wanted this altercation to escalate to see if I still cared in some way, to see if I would protect her. When he proceeded to slap her again and again, uttering bitch and fuck you, I felt I had to intervene. I began to exchange knuckles with the man on W Street, and right when I appeared to be getting the better of him, his partner walked up and shattered the 40-ounce bottle against my skull, sending me to the ground in a daze. Blood trickled down my face, and then it was 2-on-1, with body blows and foot stumps until they grew tired. We were not alone on the block, but unlike on T and V streets, I was an outlier on W, so no one dared to help. Nobody fought fair or with honor. So for the people standing around watching me getting stumped, the sight was nothing unusual. As I would tell my poet friend, however, the story on W Street does not end with body blows and foot stomps. I would tell her that pride is a dangerous thing on the street. Pride will cause one to make rash decisions that may affect the future in ways unimaginable. Pepper's boyfriend, Short Man, owned a 45. When I returned to V Street and went to their rented room, blood trickling down my face, smeared on my shirt, the 45 was the only thing on my mind. That and putting bullet holes in the 2 men on W. I wanted to hunt them down and feel the revenge while squeezing the trigger. You see, the streets create the animal, the rage, the cold-heartedness toward another human being. It turns one into jagged edges, broken shards of glass. Perhaps thinking it through in ways I could not, Pepper and Short Man blocked the exit of the door, preventing me from leaving after they gave me the gun. Pepper looked me in the eye as if to ask, is it worth it? Wisdom sometimes comes in unexpected ways. Both Short Man and Pepper had the kind of street credibility I wanted. But perhaps it came with ghosts that would never stop haunting them. On more than one occasion, I'd been told I didn't belong. And at this moment, I heard it again. Not in the words spoken, but by the blocking of the door. In the distant future, I would know what it meant to try to take a person's life, to think someone died and rejoice in that death, only to want to take everything back the next morning, like it never happened. Pepper and Short Man were trying to tell me what I would come to know later. Hell hath no fury like a woman scorned. The fact that a woman was getting beaten by a man did bother me. But the memory of body blows and foot stumps and the 40-ounce bottle cracked against my head with subsequent stitches and a scar, the price for trying to defend a woman still remained. Hope is an optical illusion more times than not. But I hope that the woman getting beaten in the alley somehow will survive. Often memories are manipulated to present the picture we want to believe is truth, when in actuality we lie through memory, recreating a series of events in our head to make a tragic event seem more palpable. I've realized that my scorn for Debbie came from the fact that I refused to see her as a complete human being, that I placed too much value on perception. 2 years later, after that altercation, I ended up homeless once again, smoking cocaine in that abandoned row house, listening to a woman get physically assaulted in the alley. I would tell my poet friend that memory would eat your ass alive. When I heard the lady being assaulted, I remember the beating I had taken, the fact that no one had come to help. I knew that I could not intervene now because these streets can turn violent in a heartbeat. No amount of rehabilitation can block that memory. All right. I think we're good here. Yeah. Okay.
Thank
All right,
you.
so we stop here. So I read a few essays from Dead Weight. There's like 7 or 8 of these things, and they kind of run the gamut in terms of narratives, right? But I just gave you the ones I thought that were in the moment that might be, something interesting to listen to, right? Yeah.
Thank you, Randall. It's wonderful, really.
Yeah, thank you. I hope I hope you got something out of it. But I remember one time a poet came to do a reading one time, and he was reading some difficult subjects, and I always remember he's like, if you don't feel it here, then he's not doing your job. So I want you to feel it here. I want you to think about it. I said some difficult, hard things, but I didn't make them up. I said them for the betterment in my own way, in my own little world, my idea of like how do we better society, and that's like understanding the history that we created. You know what I mean? And not running away from that history, like it's not there. I don't think we should do that either. Like you have to face those things. If not, they're gonna just resurface. Like we see it all the time. I mean, it's the cycle of like whatever it is, and all of this construction of race, right? Because it is a construct, and I think it's like the most damaging construct that there is, like probably introduced, to our culture. You know what I mean? Decrease too many subdivisions. It's okay for, I don't know. I will wait. I didn't want to get too far down the rabbit hole and just start talking, because I'll talk too and start having class. Yeah.
Well, we don't mind having class, Randall. So I want to welcome everyone in the audience. If you'd like to ask a question, we have a microphone over there, so please come up. I'm going to kick it off with a question for you, Randall.
Yo.
So Randall and I know each other. We were both professors at the same university for several years. And I had the opportunity to hear Randall speak in many different situations, including a graduation, quite an address at a faculty senate, kind of blew me away. And then we're also friends. And one of the things that I loved about reading your memoir was the melody. I could hear your voice in my mind, and it occurred to me that all of you now know Randall's voice, and so when you read his books, you'll get to feel that same melody, that same rhythm. And so I'm an ethnomusicologist, very interested in music and the performing arts, and I wondered if Randall could talk to us about the creative process, the connection that you make between meaning, very powerful meaning, but also melody and rhythm. How do you do that thing you do?
Well, I'm always interested in language. I believe, all things for me, start with poetry as a poet. And so that's where all of my ground, I believe poetry is often the building blocks to creativity or other creative language. So you're definitely going to always see that part of it. I think the other part of it is how do I get at concepts and constructs and other things without being preachy within a poem or within something I'm doing. And I think for me, it's oftentimes in thinking in abstract and fragmented ways. when I'm actually creating, and I pull from those things. So sometimes if you, especially in my poetry and creative presence, I definitely do that. But I'm really interested in how to make the words sing on the page. I'm aware of that. I'm totally aware of like what I'm doing. And if you go back and you read and follow my directions, you know, it'll be kind of the same thing, because I'm trying to give you hint. I'm pointing you to the way to read my work. If you look at my work, I give you all the spots to stop, to breathe, to pause, all of that. I give it to you. You just have to look at it, and so it's there. And it's, for me, I think the other part of it is working with jazz musicians now. This is key. This is key for me in my own personal growth as a writer. I've been fortunate to work with a bunch of musicians who operate in the avant-garde realm of jazz, right? And so for them, it's always the question of why we got to do the same thing twice. They don't believe in that. And so as a writer, it kind of forces me, it forces you, because as a writer in the group and writing different stuff, and we perform this stuff and thinking about it, it forces you not to fall into the same tropes that you kind of safe and comfortable with in your own writing. And it forces me to sort of like not want to create the same book twice, right? So all of my projects are very, very different. Each one is its own thing, and I'm not interested in them, you know, like I want them to be as different as possible, in every way as possible. But at the core, there is a lyricism that's going to always be there. I think working with them kind of helped me early on, helped me to find that way of like finding that lyricism within a narrative. I can't even explain it other than just know it comes from a practice. It comes from a practice of writing, you know, writing in my journal. Like, I don't write narratives. I don't write like, okay, this is it. I don't do that. I just write what comes to my mind, the fragmentation of it. And then I'll go back and I'll piece my narrative. I don't want to know what I'm getting ready to write. I want it to unfold. I want to go back and see what I can write. It's two different things, right? So I tell my, you know, so like, that's just where I am on the page. And so I think that fragmentation creates on musicality too, right? And so it lends itself to what we do with the radical reversal thing very well. So it just sort of glides into that, you know? Yeah.
Hi, Randall. It's
Hey,
Todd.
Okay, Todd.
I've got a request and then a question.
Okay.
First the request. Would you wake up your computer and go to the poster for the Radical Reversal concert tomorrow? And so that's maybe the request for you, and for the audience. There's a QR code there that if you want, you can scan free tickets. It's tomorrow evening. It'll be spoken word by Randall, and then it looks like you've got double desktops. Maybe drag the browser window over onto the other desktop. There you go. Awesome. Oh, move it back the other way a little bit. There you go. Perfect. So if everyone, and you can share it as well. Take a picture, send it out to your friends, or just go to the QR code and then forward that invitation to friends. Okay. So also, I want to encourage you to come on up and ask questions. I know that you're interested in this because I've seen the crowd grow over here as well, and the crowd, you should come on in and hang out here. Your willingness to write and talk about really difficult content, oftentimes the content and things that we avert our eyes from or glaze over in our memories. I guess, you know, how do you find the courage, and what drives you to share so objectively the things that are painful for you, as well as those that, you know, one might not be proud of, but it
Right.
compels you to move that
And
forward?
you know, definitely I'm not proud. I mean, obviously. But that's a good question. I think it all begins with me like having this sort of, I guess, you know, this fearlessness in terms of like telling my story begins when I'm in Montgomery County Detention Center, and I'm getting ready to go upstate to do my time. And I'm not a writer, I'm not a poet, I'm not any of those things. I'm just a person who has a jumpsuit on and some flip-flops and got a number. But I'm in this unit, and I begin to. It was a unit that was separated from the rest of the jail, and they had a social worker would come in and run these group sessions. And one of the things we had to do was we had to do writing assignments. And so we would have to, she would ask us to write down things that, the questions would be like very hard-hitting, like, some of the harm that you had done to others, or, some of the things that you wish you could take back. They ran the gamut. They actually appear in this book. I saved them all. And some of them appear in the first memoir. But what I'm getting at is, because before then, I think I was telling this to a class on Zoom, but, before, being a writer or anything like that, for me, I wasn't, I would never told you that, none of those things. I don't think I would have even attempted to. And so for me, when I got in this little class and I started writing and I began to notice how when I put these things on paper, how I felt a little bit better about myself. I don't know what that meant, but I liked what it was doing, and so I took it seriously. And so from that point on, we got in that group. I took every writing assignment as if I was writing something. And the lady who ran, her name was Pat Parker, and she pulled me to the side one day, and she said, whatever you do, don't ever stop writing. And no one ever told me that before. Not even my mother, my father, or anybody. I'd been to college, dropped out, and like this one little thing, like like don't stop doing that. And they had given me encouragement, and I had begun to start telling some of my stories. So I think by the time, I heard that mandate, I took that mandate all the way to prison, to upstate. I didn't stop. I didn't stop writing at all. I did not. I kept writing. I kept writing until I found a mentor. I wrote this guy named Ethelbert Miller in D.C. He's a poet, and he began to mentor me in prison. One of my first mentors. He has some of the worst poems I've probably ever written in my life. And they're actually housed at George Mason University. Like they're in the archives. I'm like, why you do that, Bert? But so they got his papers housed there. He saved them, man, and there's a file with my little sappy poems, and he was very kind and gracious. But the bigger thing is I began to start expressing myself in ways I never could in the other form of life, because I held things close to the vest. And my silence was what it was. You know what I'm saying? Like they say, the silence will not protect you. I thought it would. You know what I'm saying? That's just how it came off. And so opening, unlearning all of that stuff that I had going on sort of opened me up a little bit. And so I knew at one point I had to tell my story. And so I began thinking about this a long time, believe it or not, like what it would mean to tell a story or tell some of my stories into the public sphere. And when this one came out, I was like scared to death, because it had things in there my colleagues didn't know. It had me in there in ways that people did not know that part of me, because it had been so long. I'd got degrees, I'd done other things, and I was in another life. I was in another realm, another place. That life didn't exist anymore. But I had to write about it. Especially in this era in which, we're rethinking about what it means to have a criminal justice system. However you want to judge me, that's fair. But I can't forget what I saw. You see what I'm saying? I cannot forget the things I know to be true. I can't forget those. And we can sit around and say whatever, but so that's where it comes from. A place, I tell everybody all the time, man, I'm not, it's a good story, right? It's a very good story, right? But it's complicated. I'm not, it wasn't a juvenile, it wasn't a one-off. It was like, oh, he made a mistake as a juvenile, and so we're gonna like, do this, whatever, and he's gonna be good. But what about the people who went through some other struggles, and their story aren't as good? How is your social justice then? You see what I'm saying? How far are you willing to go when you talk about, oh, I'm about it? How far are you willing to go? Because I don't know where y'all come from, but where I came from, there are some people that are just straight up rotten. I'm sorry. Mean, ugly, and nasty. What do we do about that? I believe in all this kind of stuff, but I think you have to be really prepared yourself to understand these complexities that happen within it. So for me, it's like adding on to that. Like I want you to understand the complexity that it is with, when people, come out and they have these lives and they're trying to get their lives back together. Like, when is am I forgiven? Or do I need to do a little bit more? How much you want to forgive me? Do I deserve forgiveness? Who gets to have it? Who doesn't? So I think at its core, that's why these stories are very much part of the sort of like the language within the literature of incarceration or that whole thing. It adds to that narrative. Because I don't want you ever to get it twisted, like, for those of you who think you want to do this work, who say you're about this work. Because this work will challenge you and it will test you. It's all good until it ain't good. Then where you at? So there's questions, man, and that's what we're here for, to answer these questions. We're here to discourse and talk about these things as a community, as a society. So, yeah. That's a longer question, but I think they got it.
Specifically, that these painful topics should not be hidden or ignored, as this continues the cycle of violence due to the root cause not being addressed. What advice do you have for us as we address current racial divisions in the United States, especially in the face of misinformation, disinformation, and obstruction, even from within marginalized communities?
Boy, if I had that one. I mean, I think the bigger thing is to do not stand from the difficult truth. Do not turn away from, do not turn away from the difficult truth. Don't turn your head. I think that's the biggest thing, is to address it. I mean, I do, in whatever way that means, whether it makes someone uncomfortable or not. I just don't really care about that. I'm not here for your feelings, more so than I'm here to make sure that nothing, I'm just, so it's a lot going on, man, in terms of this world, in terms of the racial division, the racism, and all of these things. I think it starts with you and, your communities and your friends and who you, all of my friends and all of my people, my friends run the rainbow, because I believe, man, that the differences that we are the universality that we seek. There's no monotone nothing. You see what I'm saying? So you have to have that, and I think, that's the first and that's the key. Surround yourself with, with your people, whatever that is, who are like-minded. All of my people are like-minded. We clear, on the mission, at hand. And who's what? We don't have to have no problems, no talks. We're clear. And so, you know what I mean? I think that's kind of part of it. But the other part of it is it's sort of to educate and arm yourself and go out there and challenge things, just like with me. I mean, I remember when I was, before this whole life, I was in Atlanta working as an inventory clerk. I've had many lives, right? But this is the one it always haunts me the most, and I always remember it because it was a moment that it just shook me. Because I was an inventory clerk, and was working with a crew out of Louisiana, and I was the only black kid on the crew. But whatever, I had moved down to Atlanta from D.C. I wasn't incarcerated. I was trying to get away from everything. So I moved down to Atlanta. I'm working as an inventory clerk and some other stuff. And so I'm with the crew, and we riding around these grocery stores doing, 10-key punch or whatever. And they're renting an apartment, a townhouse in Atlanta. So they stop by and say, so I'm thinking we finna all go in, right? So when they pull the car up, they say, well, hold on for a minute. You need to stay right here. What you mean I need to stay right here? What you talking about, boss? What are you talking about? And so he would say, well, you know, our landlord, she doesn't really like black people. This ain't 1960. We talking about 1996, the Olympics. That's when I was in Atlanta. And I was like, what the? So I didn't even say nothing, man. I was like, I don't even believe this, because I was shocked. It took me back. So when he got back in the car, they played it off. And then they tried to have this conversation about how race doesn't exist anymore. And I know that was a damn lie. But I failed miserably in trying to convince them of what I knew to be true. And I made myself a promise that would never, ever happen again. Never. I would never, ever let no one try to tell me what I know to be true. And so you start there, right? Start there.
Hello, I'm Molly.
Hey, Molly.
Coming from someone whose goal is to make big changes to the world, what are like the 3 biggest issues you think are currently facing our criminal justice system?
Maybe the biggest thing right now is facing is how do we reimagine it? There's a book called by Danielle Surratt. It's after Michelle Alexander's New Jim Crow, and it's called Until We Reckon, right? And what it does, it talks about ways in which we can sort of responsibly reimagine what it means to have a criminal justice system, or to have people go through a system where they face crime and punishment, or some form of that. So it gets into the whole idea of community involvement, victim impact, all of those things at play. And I get it. Sometimes people, the victim may not want to have that. But sometimes they may do, depending on the situation. And there have been situations where the victim wanted to be involved in the sentencing to make sure that it was fair and equitable, depending on the relationship to the crime in which was committed, right? So I think that's one thing in terms of the punishment sometimes in relationship to the crime committed. It can be interesting, because someone can go to jail for habitual offender for 3 times after stealing a Snickers bar, and they're doing life in prison. Or the language of incarceration. I can go down the list. The language of incarceration. Why you calling somebody ex-con? Why you calling somebody ex-felon? Do you call somebody, ex-adulterer? I don't know. I mean, I think the things in which we sort of look at, that stigma and stereotypes takes a hard hit, and there's no way to recover from that. There's no recovery from it. You know what I mean? How does that happen while still, remaining true to what we're trying to do here, right? But from what I see, it's opportunity to sort of what I see from the work that I'm doing on the inside. It's opportunities for not being a statistic of recidivism. It's for, how do we provide systems that sort of operate from inside out, that are helping, people reimagine their existence, and then when they come out, give them that helping hand. So there needs to be more bridges, and there just aren't. And so that's the breakdown. You can do wonderful on the inside if you go into the program, but if you don't have that support when you come back, it's like you go from 100 to 0 real quick, because you got nothing. You know what I mean? And so we just got back from, for those of you don't know, part of what we do as Radical Reversal is we put in creative spaces, recording studios, and creative spaces in prisons and adult detention centers and federal facilities and things like that, right? And so, should I show them something a little bit? I show a little bit. All right. Let me see if we can get a little something we can show here. If I can find. can't see. I done lost it now. Here we go. So, this is, I'm gonna show you a little bit if I can get it right. This is our website, but anyway, this is our first installation was at, in Birmingham, in the South. And it was at the Youth Detention Center. Jefferson County Youth Detention Center, Birmingham, Alabama. This is the director, AKA Warden, right? This is me, obviously. This is a guy, this is a guy from a organization called Black Arts Academy, that's Wilson. And this is Travis Scott. He's part of our team with Atlanta Reversal on ground. So we have somebody there. So we have some. Is it on? Okay. So we have someone there working on ground right now, recording and teaching artists, right? So we keep that operational. Now, let's see if we can. Okay. So, this is what the studio looks like a little bit. You can see right here. Now let me come down. So this is what it began like here, right here, okay? So we started with a room that was like cluttered and not being used for nothing, and we decided, and they gave us that space to reimagine it, right? So we gutted it out, and they provided the maintenance too to help us with that, and so we took all that out, we ordered our equipment, and we began to put it in, right? And so what you have is we have a workstation. They got Mac 1, the new Mac 1 Studio. They got MPC 1s. They got monitors. They got beat machines. They got guitars. They got all kind of things for music. So they hooked up. And so what we found out in this process is like the amazing experience that we had, first of all, and that's sort of more complete version of it that you see right there, right? Is that they will come. So you build it, they will come, right? If you build it, they will come. And so what you have here is the hip-hop star Talib Kweli. I don't know if you're familiar with him. Some of you may be. But he zoomed in. Anybody familiar with Masego? Masego came by. He came by in late July, and he stayed he stayed 2 hours with the kids, and they gave him a beat. So we have a Masego beat that we got to put. I don't know if you know what that means. Like, we got a Masego beat. He had just left Drake. No, for real. And I was telling the director, I said, do you know what that means? Like, yeah, I know what it means. Anyway, so we're working on that. We got to find the right kids for that to do that. But anyway, and so this is sort of what it looks like, man. And so let me give you just a little example of like what the kids sort of record. Let's see. Workshop. Yeah. All right. I'm gonna play a little bit of this one. So, a little backstory for this one. This is one of the ones I think I told the other class. We're doing a workshop in YDC. We're working with the Alpha unit, which is a unit of girls, right? And they talking, and each of them talking about their hard experiences of, how they grew up or, where they come from. And it's always like they got violence, man, and they got these hard narratives. And I'm like, and so one day I was like, well, can you reach into, what it is that you got creatively and talk and think about all of that ugly and give me something beautiful, right? So the little girl hit me with she raised her hand, and she was like, but what if you don't know no beautiful? Damn. I don't usually I don't usually be, like lost for words. But when she said that, I was like, oh, but what if you don't know no beautiful? Damn, that's insane. And a lot of times, that's what a lot of these kids are dealing with. So I actually gave her a writing prompt. I gave her a writing prompt from the book, from the stuff that I had to write. And I told her, don't share it. I don't even want to know, because I know how those things can be. It's private. And I try to respect your space, but I said, but if you want to, you can write something for it and we can record you. And and she was like, so she tried the first day. And she couldn't do it. She got up there and she started crying. But we knew something was there. Devin, my collaborator, you'll meet him tomorrow. So we brought her back, we pulled her out, and we worked with her one-on-one, her and her buddy, Emily. And it was the guards. The guards, it was two lady guards there too, right? And so we all worked they collaboratively helped her with this piece. No, it's interesting to see the collaboration process. And so this is like what came out of that. Now, you might say it's whatever. It might even sound good. But I want you to listen to the narrative, okay? I want you to listen to the narrative. And we got a poet to do a flute on here, so the rest of it, let's see. Let's see.
Watching mama starve to feed me. You know what it was, sitting in the dark feeding for them drugs. Watch the streets take my mama, she addicted to the plug. Sleeping in that trap, chilling with them thugs. Watch my grandma burn to death. It turned me to them drugs. See my partner in that casket. It taught me not to trust. Watch my mama walk out on me. It taught me not to love. Ain't no love in the streets. I learned that at an early age. Family changed on me. I just pray for better days and hope that my actions don't lead me to an early grave, and hoping that my grandma know that what she did was not in vain.
No love in the streets. Ain't nobody tryna change. Ain't no love in the streets.
Ain't no love.
I said we gotta make a change. Ain't no love in the streets.
Ain't no love.
Ain't nobody tryna change.
Ain't nobody tryna change.
Ain't no love in the streets. I said we gotta make a change.
Everything I ever did, I did it out of pain. Watching mama suffer, I thought we never make it through the rain. Jumped in the streets, slanging dope, robbing people, causing pain. Trying to make sure that my sister never wanted for a change. At an early age, my sister crying, she said my mama dying. I snatched her up, looked her in her eyes, I told her we'll be fine. Trying to mess with mine, boy, you got a better chance at dying. And only one, my sister on the ground. Won't open her eyes, I got the crying. Thought my sister was dying, I didn't know what to do. I told my mama, you can get the step before I give you two. Then the system came and took them from me, one else I can do. So tired of rainy days, I just want the sky to turn blue.
Love in the streets.
Ain't no love,
Ain't nobody tryna change.
ain't nobody trying to change.
Ain't no love in the streets.
Ain't no love,
I said we gotta make a change.
make a change.
Ain't no love in the streets.
Ain't no love,
Ain't nobody tryna change.
yeah.
Ain't no love in the streets. I said we gotta make a change.
Stop it right there. So you get the idea, right? And if you listen, I don't know if you could catch the words to that. That's a hell of a narrative. I don't know who comes back from that. You know what I'm saying? Like, if you listen to what they're she's like 15, man. If a 15-year-old that's what they go, that's what people, so the whole system is complicated. And like, you know, and we can't, and sometimes we rush to judgment like, oh, you're in prison, look, that's where you belong, that's it, blah, 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 blah. But I think it's a little bit more complicated than that sometimes. And I think we have to understand those layers of complication, right? That's what, even I knew that, but this has taught me that even more about, you know, dealing with, especially dealing with the young people. Now, we're getting ready to go to Boston, South Essex Detention Center in a few weeks. And we're going to be working in the Peace Unit with 18 to 22-year-olds. So it'll be a very different experience, and so we'll see how that works out. But each one of them has its own experience. But I do know this. These kids come from very gang-related systems, right? But when they get in there, they drop all that. They become friends. They become collaborators. They become editors. They become you know what I'm saying? And so they work, you know, they collaboratively work on these things. And so you know, Kaya, she's out now. But I think the most important thing for her was like the idea of like having some kind of self-worth. Like maybe I do know something beautiful. Or maybe I'm not just like hopeless. Because, you know, what would happen, we would bring different people in, the city councilman, whatever, and they would cheer, and they would stand up, and they would give her like, you did something beautiful. You did that. You did that. And that's what this is about. And all of these individually, it's not about whether they're going to, you know, publish a poem. It's not whether they're going to, like, you know, be a musician or anything like that. It's for their personal betterment. And we try a lot of other things, and so, you know, for me, it's like, that what works for me. And so that's why I go, this is my mission, or I mean our mission too, because I have some wonderful people with me, my collaborator Devin Wallman, the musicians who put the sound together sometimes, and you know who will go and perform and do all this kind of stuff with me. So it's definitely a team effort. But you know, working in Birmingham, I think it's taught me a lot about just what we're trying to do, and to reevaluate even what I knew to be true. You know what I mean? And I thought I knew it because I've been doing this work for a while. But it definitely taught me something that challenged me to sort of like even rethink what I knew. So yeah.